As you of course know, the UK left the EU political structures and the European Parliament on January 31st in 2020. A lot of Brexiteers blame the government for not implementing Brexit properly, and other people in the UK want the UK to join the EU again. But the EU of course moved forward after Brexit. So in the next weeks I will make a test here on the channel by bringing news about the EU and its progress in one of my daily videos. That's supposed to keep people informed what the UK has left there and what people want to return to make informed decisions and give it a more fact-based approach. And since my magazine channel is reserved for information on the development of the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine for the time being, that is just one more reason to do it right here. But as you know, I anyway believe that exactly my audience on this channel, and yes, I mean you, needs this information. And I have a playlist EU on this channel now. But now let's talk about today's topic. The Commission took a big step towards fighting microplastic pollution by adopting measures that restrict microplastics intentionally added to products under the EU chemical legislation REACH. It is estimated that 42,000 tons of microplastics intentionally added to products are released in the EU every year. The new rules will prevent the release to the environment of about 500,000 tons of microplastics. Once in the environment, microplastics do not biodegrade and cannot be removed. They accumulate in animals, including fish and shellfish, and are consequently also consumed as food by humans. Microplastics have been found in marine, freshwater, and terrestrial ecosystems, as well as in food and drinking water. Their continued release contributes to permanent pollution of our ecosystems and our food chains. Exposure to microplastics in laboratory studies has been linked to a range of negative ecotoxic and physical effects on living organisms. The new rules prohibit the sale of microplastics as such and of products to which microplastics have been intentionally added and that release those microplastics when used. Common examples include cosmetics, detergents, and infill material for artificial sport surfaces. Products used at industrial sites or not releasing microplastics during use are derogated from the sale ban, but their manufacturers will have to provide instructions on how to use and dispose of the product to prevent microplastics emissions and report the estimated microplastics emissions every year. The definition of microplastics used in the restriction is broad in scope, covering all synthetic polymer particles measuring less than 5 millimeters that are organic, insoluble, and resist biodegradation. Examples of affected products containing microplastics include the granular infill material used on artificial sport surfaces. This is the largest source of releases of intentionally added microplastics in the environment. The ban applies after 8 years to give pitch owners and managers the time to switch to alternatives and allow for most existing sport pitches to reach their end of life. Our artificial grass is done without microplastics now, by the way. There's also cosmetics. For exfoliation or obtaining a specific texture, fragrance, or color, they contain microplastics. And the ban applies immediately for cosmetics containing microbeads. That means small plastic beads used for exfoliation. It applies after 4 to 12 years for other cosmetics, depending on the complexity of the product, the need for reformulation, and the availability of suitable alternatives. But which products are not included in the scope of the restriction? Products that contain microplastics but do not release them, or their release can be minimized. For example, construction materials, products used at industrial sites, or products already regulated by other EU legislation, for example, medical products or food and feed. Those products can continue to be sold. Their manufacturers will have to report the estimated microplastics emissions from those products to the ECHA every year. They will also have to provide instructions on how to use and dispose of the product to prevent microplastics emissions. Products where the microplastics have not been added on purpose but are present unintentionally, for example, sludge, compost, are not in the scope of the restriction. To tackle microplastics pollution while preventing the risk of fragmentation in the single market, the Commission requested the European Chemicals Agency, that is the ECHA, to assess the risk posed by microplastics intentionally added to products and whether further regulatory action at EU level was needed. ECHA concluded that microplastics intentionally added to certain products are released into the environment in an uncontrolled manner and recommended to restrict them. ECHA's scientific committees analyzed ECHA's suggested restriction of intentionally added microplastics and supported it, with some recommendations to the Commission. The restriction adopted by the Commission is based on the evidence and recommendations from ECHA and its scientific committees. The first measures will start applying in 20 days when the restriction enters into force. However, in most cases, the sale ban will apply after longer transitional periods, I talked about them before, to give time to the stakeholders to adapt to the new rules and identify alternatives. And so it is not happening everything at once, but we've seen this in many other places as well, that they have transitional periods. But nevertheless, they don't want to ruin the whole economy with everything, and they are still ahead of many other countries with that, so this transitional period will not be a catastrophic thing, for example. But what I said earlier about our artificial grass pitches here for football, they were using microplastics in the beginning, or not. It's usually bigger than microplastics, but still it's plastics. Now they're using only sand for this. They did some changes there. But nevertheless, in the past 2 years, the Commission has replied to many questions from stakeholders and member states on this to explain the upcoming rules and help with their implementation and enforcement. The Commission now intends to collect these replies in an informal Q&A document that will be made available on the Commission website shortly. After the new rules start applying, that means before the end of 2023. In total, ECHA consulted stakeholders 3 times on this restriction dossier through a call for evidence in 2018, the consultation on the Annex 15 restriction dossier in 2019, and the consultation on the draft opinion of the Committee for Socio-Economic Analysis in 2020. Stakeholders submitted information on the specific impacts of this possible restriction on their field of interest, as well as the time needed to have suitable alternatives available on the EU market. The Commission takes public health and environmental protection very seriously and is committed to curbing microplastics pollution. At the same time, it is committed to better regulation and thoroughly analysis the relevant impacts of its proposals, including on businesses, before taking any action. The impacts of this restriction proposal have been estimated, as I said, by the ECHA, and they are taking the stakeholders' input into account. There will, of course, be some impact because the costs for all stakeholders, industry, sport clubs, municipalities, etc., are estimated to be up to 19 billion euros over the next 20 years. But they are committed that the expected socio-economic costs of this restriction are proportionate to the environmental benefits in terms of avoided emissions of microplastics into the environment. And so we will all benefit from this. And if you want to see another video right now or visit me on my newest channel, which is doing very well, it's all on this side of this video in the end screen right now. I'll see you there. I'll be back.